Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. Thank you for coming in off the beach or inside from this beautiful day to join us today for Spice Science. I'm James Stevenson. I am with the University of Florida Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences, your extension of the University of Florida here in Pinellas County, coming to you today, as always, from Brooker Creek Preserve in the north part of the county. Today's presentation is a little bit of a departure from our normal programming, as we are an arm of the Natural Resource Conservation branch of the Extension Services here in Pinellas County, and therefore it's our job to teach natural resource conservation. So what on earth does that have to do with spices? Well, it's kind of a sneaky way of getting at people, getting people interested in plants, therefore the plants that are around us, and therefore the importance of our native plants and ecosystems. So trying to appeal to a broader sense of understanding of the natural world through those things that we are most familiar with. We had great success with a class that we taught called Kitchen Botany, teaching people about plant parts, teaching participants about plant parts through those very familiar objects, the vegetables and fruits that we're all very familiar with. One slide in that presentation addressed spices and the whole concept of what are spices. And an offhand remark was made, an entire class could be built around that subject, and we got the feedback that it should be. So here we are today with Spice Science, coming to you from IFAS Extension in Pinellas County. So we all know what spices are, but what are spices? These are flavorings that come from various parts of plants. There's a whole lot of different plants out there, 400,000 that we know of, different plants out there. And all these plants have different parts, of course, the leaves, the roots, the stems, the flowers, everything. And all of these parts have been discovered by humans to contain different substances that humans have taken into our culinary tradition, and oftentimes hand in hand with medicinal history. So food is medicine, food as medicine, and using these strong smelling compounds, these very brightly flavored compounds, often hot compounds, located in different parts of different plants, the seeds, the roots, the bark, even flower buds. And we'll also finish up today discovering some spices that are actually derived from plant fruit. So we get it, we know intrinsically what spices are, but again, what are spices? Well, plants are the ultimate synthesizers. We all hopefully know, or certainly we've been exposed to the idea that plants photosynthesize. They synthesize sugar or carbohydrates. They synthesize, or they make carbohydrates from photo, the light, and carbon dioxide and water. And using light energy and the available carbon dioxide and the available water that's present in our atmosphere and on the surface of our planet, knocking all those bits together and creating carbohydrate, the basis of the food web, right? Well, plants don't just photosynthesize. They can synthesize all kinds of compounds from the raw materials found on our planet. And recall, or just bear with me, that plants are stuck in place, right? Plants can't get up and run away from any sort of attack. So plants sitting there making all this wonderful carbohydrate, all this wonderful sugar, they're sitting ducks. So plants have to defend all of that hard work by creating creating some sort of defense. And plants are kind of limited into the ways that they can defend themselves. They can't wrap themselves in a tooth-proof cloak because they need access to the sun. So there are very few avenues for plants to protect themselves, but being those expert synthesizers, plants can take these elements and knock them together in their special ways to create toxins, to protect themselves, to make themselves distasteful or poisonous. Ingesting certain plants can actually be deadly, right? And through trial and error and the pressures of evolution and time and plants synthesizing toxins to protect themselves and the predators evolving workarounds like gigantic livers, this race continues and plants continue to experiment as evolution carries forward with defensive chemicals. Well, people, being large organisms and plants being relatively small, people can often overcome the best plant defense and use what is erstwhile a defensive mechanism and turn them into a flavoring. So today we're talking about spices. What about herbs? Well, it was our thought that herbs are kind of done to death. We hear, every time we turn around, we hear about herbs and herbal this and flavoring this and herb that and herb growing. Spices are often not given the same attention. And so it was our goal today to leave the herbs to the experts and to explore with participants today this world of spices on their own. But again, the same concept with herbs and spices, these flavorings that humans have taken and incorporated into primarily our food preparation, but also, and importantly, medicinal applications of these plant constructs. These are ultimately plant defense mechanisms. And as I mentioned, plants have been at war ever since other organisms appeared on the surface of the planet and began to eat them. Plants had no recourse other than to try and synthesize deadly enough or at least distasteful enough toxins ahead of the pressures of grazing. Certain organisms have been able to overcome those defenses. Other organisms, like certain caterpillars, can actually incorporate plant toxins into their own tissues, rendering themselves toxic. These are EO moth caterpillars. And the spines that you see along the body are not just decorative. They actually contain venom, and they can shoot venom into anything that might accidentally brush up against them, much less try and ingest. So here we have a case with plants trying not to get eaten, the predators kind of outwitting them. Time moved on, the world of animals became more and more complex and larger. The herbivores got to be larger and larger. Plants had to continually develop, devise, or evolve defensive mechanisms, defensive chemicals, but the animals were right alongside with them. And we have the grazing animals that actually have to chew their food 6-7 times. They have to bring it up and chew it again, not just because of the fiber content, but also to break down some of these chemicals. So all this evolutionary pressure, this arms race, as it were, between the plants trying to protect themselves and the herbivores just trying to make a living, have led us to exploit, as people, the defense mechanisms that we call the spices. So we'll start with the group of the part of the plant where a majority of our spices are located. And it makes some pretty good sense if you think about it. And that is the seeds. The compounds that are found in seeds bring us quite a lot of our spices. That's because there's a pressure put upon plants to protect their seeds from those organisms that would very happily eat the seeds. And I'm talking about crushing the seeds, grinding them up, and swallowing the seed and using the seed itself as food. If you think of it, the seed is the most important thing that a single plant is ever going to produce, because that seed has to survive. One seed in a lifetime of a plant has to survive in order for the population of that species to be stable. So seeds cannot be wasted. Seeds cannot be lost. Seeds really can't be eaten. But along come the animals developing ways of eating, chewing, cracking, grinding, swallowing, and ingesting seeds. So you can see how that race goes on. We have this seed-eating bird, and its beak is actually adapted to crush through the hard covering, the hard coating of a seed, defense layer number one, eating the nice embryo and cotyledons inside for its own nutrition, and overcoming whatever chemical this plant has placed inside the seed to try and keep it from being eaten. It does work, and certain seeds are definitely avoided by grain-eating and seed-eating organisms. Quite a few of our seeds that we'll look at today come from this family of plants, the umbel family, the umbelliferae, the group of plants, the family of plants that have their flowers in these flat umbrellas, giving them their name, the umbelliferae. And this includes the plants like parsley, dill, fennel, carrots, cilantro. You might be familiar with some of these. They're all related to each other. They're in different genera, but they all produce these flowers. And if you look at this flat-topped inflorescence, that's a whole bunch of tiny little flowers arranged in this flat-topped umbrella. And if we zoom in just a little bit more, each individual flower, very, very small. The pollinators for these things are miniature bees and little flies, just tiny little pollinators landing on this simple disc to get a nectar reward and therefore picking up pollen and taking it to the next plant. And upon the fertilization of the egg cells in the center of one plant, that's when the fruit grows and the seed develops, that seed that is going to reproduce that plant. And so the plant, in this case, Anise, Pimpinella anisum, this anise places within the seed defensive compounds, defensive chemicals to prevent the seeds from being eaten. And guess what people have done? We've taken these and we've ground them up, and we like the way that defensive chemical tastes. We love the anise. It's actually native to the Middle East, and it was brought into Europe for medicinal purposes. And again, that very highly fragrant, pungent, kind of burning sensation that it might get, that suggested medicinal properties. And it turns out that a lot of times it actually works. This was used as a carminative or carminative, however you want to say it. You might not want to say it when you find out what it means. A carminative is something that prevents the buildup of trapped wind. It's fart powder, basically. So this was used medicinally for gastrointestinal distress, but then it also found its way into culinary applications. One of the key compounds that's found in anise seeds, and is not unique to anise seeds, is this compound called anethol. And not only does it prove to be distasteful to potential seed eaters, but it also confers protections against microorganisms that might pose a threat to the seed and therefore the offspring of the plant. Bacteria, fungus, nematodes, virus, all these things. Anethol has shown to be effective as a bactericide, a fungicide, and nematicide. All the sides can be found also, and has the distinctive flavor, that anise flavor, that kind of licorice flavor. Anise can be found today in the US in black jelly beans. That's what give most black jelly beans their licorice flavor. In the UK, there's actually a confection called aniseed balls. Pizzelle, I don't know. In Italy, the thing that you eat with tea and coffee, that little thin biscuit, that's flavored with anise. And Pfeffernuss in Germany. So anise not only began as a medicinal additive to our food, it has become, quote unquote, recreational. And we now use anise to flavor things just for fun. Seems like everywhere anise was grown, someone figured out how to make it into alcohol, or to use it to flavor alcohol. And we have all of these anise flavored liqueurs from around the Mediterranean, and they're all more alike than different. You might have heard of ouzo or sambuca, maybe absinthe. In Turkey, the anise flavored liqueur is known as raki or arak in the rest of the Middle East. So here's something that has found its way not only into medicine and into food, but also into alcohol, possibly conferring its antibacterial, fungicidal, nematicidal properties, even through drinking, through the activity of downing a flaming shot of ouzo. A relative of anise, we're still in that family of plants that produces those flat umbrellas, the umbelliferae family or the Apiaceae family. So a cousin of anise is caraway. And look who it has, anethol, that same compound that seems to pop up throughout this family of flowering plants, placed not only in the seeds, but in the leaves and stems. Caraway, however, is found throughout the northern hemisphere, and it has kind of some extra compounds, or some additional compounds have been isolated from and identified as things like carvone, the same kind of minty, bright flavor. It's the same compound that's found in spearmint. So if you're familiar with caraway or caraway seeds, ground caraway seeds in particular, you might pick up that kind of spearminty flavor. Also, the kind of lemon notes, if you will, that this spice imbues come from a compound called limonene, which, no surprise, is also found in citrus and has that very citrusy flavor and fragrance. Limonene is also found to be an effective insecticide. So humans not only have used raw spices or roasted and ground spices medicinally and for other applications, humans have been able to extract the various components and use them for the same things that the plants synthesized them for in the first place. Limonene, an effective insecticide, surely not unknown to the plants, who simply create the limonene, thus preventing their various parts from being chewed on. And now humans can take that forward and use it to actually eradicate pest species of insects. Other anethol, yeah, we've been through these before. The various applications of these compounds that have been isolated, not only in Caraway, but in others as well. The Cardamom, as we mentioned before, is being been researched as a potential mosquito repellent. Wouldn't that be nice if we could run around smelling like Caraway? First, we have to make sure that the Cardamom doesn't have negative, deleterious, toxic effects on the wearer. It's one thing to repel mosquitoes. It's another thing to fall ill or worse in the process. And some of the other applications of limonene, not only as that insecticide or insect repellent, but it's an effective solvent and is found in a lot of cleaning products. And anethol, we've mentioned before, all the sides, fungicide, bactericide, nematicide, and another one that's being, I keep wanting to say interviewed. It's not being interviewed, it's being inspected. It's being tested as an insect repellent. The various culinary applications of this hitherto exotic spice, now kind of part of our everyday cupboard, can be found in rye bread. It's that, curious kind of semicircular, sickle-shaped seed in rye bread. There's a sauerkraut today, St. Patrick's Day, sauerkraut, caraway seeds. If you're familiar with the very hot pepper condiment called harissa, caraway, ground caraway is found in that lovely condiment as well. And funny enough, despite the fact of its warm climate origins, Finland, of all places, is the #1 world supplier of our caraway to our shelves in our marketplaces. Sticking with the family, we're still in the Apiaceae, the plant family that produces the flat-topped umbrellas of flowers. Here's actually the genus that gives the family its name, Apiaceae. This is Apium graveolens, which is celery. Graveolens means very highly scented or very fragrant, and all parts of the celery plant are quite fragrant. Just imagine slicing through celery stalks, which are actually fat leaf veins, actually, and you can smell that lovely celery fragrance. Celery seed as well is another one of those Apiaceae seeds that have all kinds of protective compounds packed into the seed to prevent them being eaten. But humans, of course, have ground them up and ate them up, because ground celery seed is actually not only fragrant, it's very flavorful. Despite the fact that the plant's trying to defend itself, humans have found a way to add that toxin, otherwise toxin, into our food to brighten it up. This is an ancient spice found, believed to have been found in Tut's tomb as one of the gifts or relics that were found throughout the tomb when it was inspected. Celery was mentioned in the Iliad. It has the very important job of flavoring Bloody Marys today. It's, of course, an important component of Old Bay seasoning. So you can see how these spices have gone from something very grand and very royal and buried with pharaohs to the very mundane, everyday uses, or maybe occasional uses, of flavoring a Bloody Mary. As far as the medicinal applications that this spice has been applied to, very important in Ayurvedic medicine, which of course is a plant-based medicine from India and surrounding regions. And celery seed has been used for these various kind of inflammatory conditions like water retention, arthritis, elevated blood pressure, and has been used, we don't know how successfully, but has been used as mosquito repellent. Again, mosquitoes being the most deadly animal on earth, hands down, no other more deadly animal in the world than mosquitoes. Repelling mosquitoes is very important. So the more sources of mosquito repellent that don't harm the wearer, the better. Celery also has quite a modern application. Celery seed extract is a very major player in the perfume industry, even to this day. We're still in the family, we're still in the Apiaceae. We haven't left this incredibly fragrant, toxic, synthetic family that has quite a lot of synthesis of toxic materials to protect itself. Coriander. Coriander is the seed. The spice coriander is the ground seed of the cilantro. So cilantro refers to the herb, the leaves, and coriander refers to the crushed seed. So you know, if you're familiar with cilantro, the flavor compounds that are locked up in there. Also, the defensive chemicals found in the seeds. We've not yet met linalool, a compound found in coriander, which again is one of the sides, fungicide and insecticide. Pinene we haven't met yet. As per its name, pinene is also found throughout the conifers and is an important terpene, like turpentine, another insect repellent, not necessarily an insect killer, but just something that would keep the insects away or at least turn them off. You know about the kind of spicy citrus flavor of ground coriander. But interestingly, this plant, coriandrum, actually synthesizes aldehydes, and aldehydes are soap. So if you're one of the unlucky few or unlucky 50% that have the genetic predisposition to be able to taste or are sensitive to the aldehydes found in cilantro, you're going to taste the very real presence of the soap. And so if it tastes soapy to you, that's because it is. And unfortunately, you are unlucky enough to be able to taste those aldehydes present in the cilantro. This is another one that is found throughout the Middle East, much more popular still in the Middle East, although it did work its way into European cuisine. The Europeans found coriander to be a delightful addition to pickles. And the white beers or the Weiss beers, the wheat beers in Belgium, if you taste one of those, Hoegaarden I think is one of them, you might just, now that you've heard, be able to taste those coriander notes in the background. Just about done with the Apiaceae family. Here's cumin. Cumin, of course, being a very important component of our chilies, Tex-Mex cuisine, despite the fact that it is actually a Middle Eastern native, Middle Eastern and Indian native, another very, very ancient spice, containing, among other things that we've met before, cuminaldehyde, which is being tested for its antiviral effects. So again, here we have a plant producing chemicals that are protecting not just the seed from being eaten, but perhaps the developing embryo once that plant is trying to germinate from attacks from things like virus that might cause that offspring to not make it to adulthood. Other bits about cumin, culinary uses throughout. Northern Europe, there's a cheese that actually has a cumin flavor. It's everything Indian cumin is. The Portuguese and Spanish brought cumin to the New World, as it were, and this is how it found its way into the Spanish colonies, as it were, the areas under Spanish influence, such as Central and South America, and how it has turned up in our chilies. Enough of the Apiaceae. Let's look at another seed. Let's look at nutmeg, a very large seed, a very tropical seed. This is not a plant that can grow in Europe. This is not a plant that fulfills its life cycle in one season. Nutmeg is an evergreen plant from the tropics, and as such, upon its discovery by the West and its exploitation, had to be moved over thousands of miles and passed through many hands. And you can just imagine the intrigue and the dark tales of moving this very expensive export-import across vast oceans years and years ago. This is the very large seed of this tropical evergreen. The outer coating of the seed, here you can see this kind of red-shaped net that covers the seed, which of course is enclosed within the flesh of the fruit. The mace is what that's called, which is also used as kind of an inferior spice, a less fragrant, a less flavorful spice the mace is. Limonene, which we met before, the kind of citrus flavored, very astringent limonene, which has all of its sides, herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, bactericides. Myristica is the genus of nutmeg. Myristicin is actually a poison, and this is actually a poison that in the right quantities can affect humans. We're not too big to be immune to the effects of myristicin. And unfortunately, we'll get to that in just a second. As I mentioned, being a tropical evergreen, this is a plant, or the seeds of this plant had to be moved thousands of miles, very dangerous sea crossings, perilous sea crossings. During the plague in the 17th century, the medicinal expectations of this plant were heightened, and it became very, very in demand. Where the plant was grown in a small group of islands in the Pacific, the native peoples succumbed to the pressures of the demand for this spice and lost the capacity, lost the capability through massacre of being the owners and dealers in this spice. And the marauders actually came in and killed them all and took over the production on their own island of this spice. Finally, the English came in, and instead of staying on these small islands that were kind of far away, the English took the nutmeg plant, or propagated nutmeg, or just took the seeds and planted them in their own empire a little bit closer to home. So nutmeg has quite a cloak and dagger history. Now, despite the fact that this plant was in very high demand during the plague, and the expectations were high that this magic plant that was so expensive, the spice that had to come from so long, must have all these magical powers. Unfortunately, it didn't, and we have yet to discover any double-blind lab tests that have shown any efficacy to any degree worth using as a modern member of the pharmacopoeia. But that myristicin being poisonous, you can't stop people from pushing the envelopes, and actually nutmeg has and is being used recreationally, coming that close to passing on for fun. And there is a nutmeg intoxication, which is possible. It's found in sweet and savory dishes throughout the world. In India, it's actually smoked. This is other spices that are smoked for various reasons and uses, if you will. Here in America and Northern Europe, we traditionally use it in sweet concoctions, not so much for the savory. So those are some seeds, mostly seeds with their compounds stuck in the seed to protect the seedling, using the using the fungicides and the bactericides to prevent the embryo from falling ill, filling up the seeds with toxins to prevent the seeds from even being eaten in the first place. And here we are, the humans, the large organisms with the large livers and the complex taste, who have overcome the toxic effects of these and taken advantage of the rather flavorful. So let's go from tip to toe and have a look at some roots that have found their way into our spice cupboards today. Ginger being a very popular root spice. Technically it's a stem, but we won't split hairs today. It's underground, we'll call it a root. The ginger root, a tropical grassy plant, the very thick underground stems, these thickened roots, very juicy, very they hold lots of water. If you've ever grown ginger, you know that it produces a lovely spike of flowers. They look similar to orchids. It's not that distantly related to the orchids. Native to India and that part of the Near East. Today, India being the world producer of ginger, there's lots of study into those compounds found in the ginger root that cause it to be so darn hot. That heat, the effect that zingerone has on our mucous membranes and tissues that give the ginger its really fiery, hot flavor. Not too many things have been shown that zingerone is effective against, but because it is available in such large quantities, it is certainly being studied quite a bit. As far as where you find ginger, it's pretty much in everything in Asia. It's one of the basic kind of salt and pepper seasonings in a lot of Asian cuisines. If you've ever been lucky enough to try real ginger beer, delicious, fiery hot, popular in the Caribbean, oftentimes made at home ginger beer. Ginger is mostly used in sweets in most of Europe. Ginger is also very easy to grow on your own. Despite the fact that fresh ginger is available year-round for introduction into your culinary repertoire, you can certainly grow your own here in Florida, here in this part of Florida, just in a pot of potting soil. Get a small hand of even just a little piece this big, maybe 3-4 inches long as it has a couple of these buds or eyes where individual stems are going to poke forward. Place it in a pot of potting soil, wait. Your ginger root is going to have to reaccustom itself to being a plant after being harvested and dried and refrigerated and shipped and put on the shelf. Leave it in its potting soil, and soon enough the leaves will emerge, and soon after you will have a pot full of ginger leaves. When it's time to harvest, just reach your hand down in the potting soil, break off just a little bit, the size of half your thumb. Fresh ginger right out of the ground has tons and tons more flavor, more of these compounds than store-bought, because they haven't been sitting around giving these compounds time to break down and disintegrate. You get them fresh out of the garden, they're going to taste that much better. Another We're not going to split hairs today, not really a root, but it's underground, so we'll call it a root. Garlic bulbs. Now garlic, ubiquitous, we get it. Garlic might even be considered an herb because it's more fleshy, it's used more fresh. It's used more or less when the plant is still living. Native to the Middle East. Again, it's been in cultivation forever. The Brits, when it first came to Northern Europe as a medicinal plant, garlic got a bad reputation. Like in the UK, they just didn't want anything to do with it medicinally or culinarily. And it's interesting that that sentiment is still around today. There is still a little bit of a nationalist attitude about the introduction of garlic or the use of garlic culinarily, despite the fact of the multicultural cuisines that are available to people who live in the UK. I'll test the food, but I'm going to complain about the garlic just because that reputation is casting such a long shadow. Despite the fact that garlic has this incredibly pervasive odor and flavor, and despite the fact that it has been used quite a lot in medicines for various applications, those applications haven't withstood, unfortunately, the double-blind tests that are necessary to grant official status as medicinal to this plant yet. Obviously not harmful, but we just haven't found anything that garlic does in particular other than give you really bad breath, which is double-blind proved. That's because the compounds, AMS, gets into your blood. It is actually absorbed through the small intestine, makes its way into your blood, circulates through your blood. It really does, vampires. It really does. Gets into your lungs and is exchanged through your carbon dioxide. You actually do breathe out this AMS compound that is produced by the plant as a defensive chemical that we just can't seem to get enough of. There is spice to be found in the bark of trees. Yes, we all love to eat tree bark. We love to eat cinnamon, and cinnamon is derived from several different species of a tropical evergreen. So cinnamon is one of those formerly very expensive, hard to get, cloak and dagger, shipping, piracy, theft, intrigue, all these things just to get cinnamon bark to the shores where the demand was outside of its normal range. So there's various different kinds of cinnamon. There's one cassia, Cinnamomum cassia, which looks really the most like bark. And this is the cinnamon that is used very often in Chinese cuisine. You can see it here on the left, looking very much like tree bark, can be added into dishes, simply broken into finger-sized bits that are then taken out once the dish is ready to be prepared. Perhaps the one that is most available whole as bark is the Indonesian cinnamon. This is the one that you can actually get off the shelf in the grocery store here in the West, and it might not look unfamiliar. Curled up, that's why it's curled up. It's tree bark, and it's dried up a little bit, and it's curled in on itself. The round tree circumference, take a little bit of that, it's going to try and stay round, and it ends up curling in on itself. The Indonesian cinnamon is that cinnamon stick that's very available, as I mentioned before. Perhaps the most flavorful and the most sought after, and arguably the best tasting ground cinnamon, is the Sri Lankan cinnamon. And so if you want the best cinnamon, look for the Sri Lankan. And it is also very obviously bark, and you can see it's also very much curled in on itself, but it's much more fibrous. You can see looking at these end on that the fibers are much, much finer than the Indonesian. And so we've got these various grades of cinnamon. Interestingly, the ground cinnamon that you buy already as a powder is cassia, is this probably quote unquote the most inferior, the least flavorful is that which is sold as the ground. The sticks, the Indonesian, if you were to grind that yourself, you're going to get a higher quality, a better flavor, but the ultimate comes from the Sri Lankan. So if you really want the best cinnamon, don't hesitate to eat the cinnamon. The cinnamon does have quite a lot of medicinal applications. This is one of those anti-inflammatory. These are some of our herbs are finally getting the attention from the modern pharmacopoeia as compounds that have already been synthesized and have already had applications by plants for millions of years that humans are only just discovering. Cinnamon was a very secretly traded commodity. Weren't quite sure where it originally came from. The sources of lots of cinnamon were kept secret. But now, of course, with international trade and travel, cinnamon is thankfully available year-round. Of all places to find spices, believe it or not, flower buds, unopened flower, unripened fruit, everything, just the very flower bud of the caper. This is a plant that is related to the cruciferous vegetables, the broccolis and cabbages and the radishes with their sharp defensive chemicals that are also found in caper are concentrated in the flower bud, because just like trying to keep your seeds from being eaten, here's a plant that defends even the flower before it opens by stuffing it full of these hot mustard oils and sulfurous compounds to try to make the flower buds distasteful. A caper, culinarily speaking, not murder mystery speaking, but culinary speaking, a caper is a flower bud. And of course, they can be purchased pickled, as you see here on the right. You can also get them dried and salted. There are giant capers, there are tiny capers, a couple of different species. They have various applications. That very strong, pungent, kind of hot flavor might not suit everyone's need. They're little kind of flavor bombs, if you will. Caper as a plant, Caparis, we do have a native Caparis here in Florida. It has not been exploited as a spice, as a flavor, but its relative, which is found in the Middle East, very highly adapted to living in extremely dry conditions. This, of course, is the Western Wall in the old city of Jerusalem, and out of the cracks between the massive bricks of the Western Wall grow these caper bushes. So it just shows the tenacity, the veracity, and the will to survive in the desert that these caper bushes possess. Another flower bud comes from another tropical semi-evergreen shrub, the clove, Syzygium. And the clove flower bud is incredibly aromatic, incredibly full of these defensive compounds that will protect the flower bud by making it hopefully repulsive. But to us, we find clove very, very warming, very much associated with holiday times. Cloves were one of these tropical spices that, of course, were very hard to come by, maybe even only seasonally, which might be why This is one of the flavors that's only associated with one time of year, either when you trot out your good stuff, or perhaps this was only when the ships were returning with their stockpiles from the tropics. It's found throughout the kind of southern hemisphere. It has been moved all around depending on who's in charge of what area to grow as a crop. This is another plant that produces defensive toxins, and those toxins have been found to be toxic to bacteria, fungus, virus, these things. In larger quantities, though, toxic to the ingestor writ large. So there's a composite compound called eugenol that can be actually quite discomforting if taken in too large of quantities. Found throughout wherever this spice has been delivered, it has certainly found its way into the cuisine of the various areas where it is wound up. In Indonesia, closer to where it is actually found wild, it is turned into a cigarette. And I probably shouldn't tell this story, but you can still get clove cigarettes if you're a moody teenager in the 80s. These were definitely a thing, clove cigarettes. We're going to finish up with fruit. As I mentioned in the beginning, you might be surprised that some of our spices are actually derived from fruit. And fruit in our brains, in our supermarkets, we think of fruit being sugary, sweet, cold, strawberries, watermelon, apples, all these wonderful things. But you would be surprised. Some fruit, when they're ripe, are dry. And some fruit, when they're ripe, are loaded with defensive chemicals, again, to protect the seeds inside from being chewed up and eaten, and thus putting an end to the life cycle. One of these fruits is star anise. And so here we have several different fruits laid out of star anise. And when this fruit is ripe, it's dry, and it splits along these little seams, and the seeds inside and the fruit flesh itself, the star-shaped bit on the outside, these contain that defensive compound to prevent its being eaten or bothered until the seed is in the ground and the life cycle is picking up the next generation. Another evergreen, very, very ancient plant. This was a flowering plant when flowering plants were first figuring out how to flower. So this represents among the very first of the flowering plants. Interestingly, this is a plant that contains a large quantity of anethol, and it is easier and cheaper to grow than anise, the very first spice that we met in today's presentation. Even though that plant completes its life cycle in 1 year, it's grown in Finland, and so on and so on. This is a large evergreen shrub. That means it lives from year to year to year to year, and the anethol can be extracted from this plant much more cheaply than from anise. But even more interestingly, star anise, its position in demand internationally is not so much as a spice. 90% of star anise is given to the production of Tamiflu, which is a relatively new preparation to help cure what used to be one of the worst diseases on Earth, the seasonal flu or influenza. And one of the most effective drugs, although not preventative, is Tamiflu, and it comes from star anise. Various applications, the anethol, that anise flavor, that licorice flavor, can be found in Chinese 5-spice blend. You'll definitely be able to smell or taste that anise flavor, that licorice flavor. Star anise, whole fruits are dropped into the broth when making pho, which is becoming more and more popular. It's one of the additives for mulled wine. So if you have a really, really, really bad bottle of wine, which I imagine there is such a thing, you can add a bunch of herbs like star anise and a couple of cheap cinnamon sticks and bring that flavor up a couple of notches. And sometimes star anise is even added to coffee to take away some of that bitterness and add another layer of flavor. Another fruit, very expensive fruit, still very expensive, is cardamom. Cardamom, despite the fact that it comes from a ginger relative, does not produce enough fruit, and it doesn't produce enough fruit that is very easy to harvest. So it causes a little bit of trouble in the growing and harvesting end of things. Not a year-round producer of fruit either. Cardamom is more in sync with wet and dry seasons, so it's not a year-round producer of its fruit. But once the fruit is harvested, the cardamom pods do have a one-of-a-kind flavor and is therefore very sought out for that interesting, complex, I can only describe it as very bright and very green cardamom because of its difficulty in growing, processing, harvesting, post-harvest processing, all these things. It is one of the top 3 in expense behind vanilla and saffron. It was introduced into South America, where it is that's where it's most widely grown today. So you get the various applications, the limonene that we've met before, making it a little bit citrusy, menthone, sounding like menthol, obviously a compound found not only in species like this, but in some of the mints as well. It's one of the Indian spices. Of course, many are. The Indians very famous for very complex spice blends, making very, very complex, wonderful flavors in their cooking. Although, interestingly, this tropical spice is very popular in Nordic cooking. And this is one that in the Middle East you can find in your coffee, your cardamom coffee. You can actually find tins of coffee with cardamom in if you look closely. And if you look really closely, you can find cardamom in your chewing gum, with the idea that the cardamom having the ability to neutralize the toughest breath odors. So there's a medicinal application that you can test yourself. And I think we'll finish up today with a hot fruit, the hottest fruit that we know, the chili fruit. Chili peppers, capsicum is the genus. There are several species of capsicum, but there are hundreds of cultivars. Capsicum is one of the plants that can go through an entire life cycle in 1 year, making hybrids very quickly developed. So a grower with 2 different chili plants can cross them, and the next year they can grow a plant that has hopefully the best components of the 2 parents, or a combination of components of the 2 parents. And so hundreds of cultivars have been developed this way through natural or unnatural selection of natural mutations. Artificial hybridizations has left us with a huge variety of capsicum fruits with varying degrees of heat or smoke or sweetness, or all these things, varying degrees of the defensive chemicals, capsaicin being the top and the hottest. The plant's native distribution is Central and South America. We actually have a native Southeast US capsicum species, the bird pepper. Birds lacking the receptor for capsaicin are almost welcomed by the plant to swallow the fruit because it doesn't touch them. They have no idea that it'll burn your beak off. The seeds pass through the bird's digestive system just fine. The seeds shoot out the other end, and a new generation is born. Squirrels take a bite of chili pepper. They are susceptible. They won't keep chewing up those seeds, and those seeds will be left to germinate into the next generation. This is a plant that has found its way around the world. The Spanish took a liking to it and moved it. What direction is that? East, west, across the Pacific, making its way into Asia and Asian cuisine, and east back to Europe and across. And so capsicum is now found around the world. And how it got from Mexico all the way around the world is almost anyone's guess, but it is wherever it has been brought and established, it is a favorite due to those very, very arguably uncomfortable effects of the capsaicin. It got the name pepper because black pepper was already known. And here's something that gave you that same kind of burning effect, giving it its name, the peppers. There, as I mentioned before, are many, many varieties. That capsaicin that is present is effective against the mucus linings. That's why pepper spray has such a negative effect on the eyeballs and mouth. And surprisingly, that is a sensation that people actually hunt down. Our last fruit is, as mentioned, the black pepper. And the black pepper is the dried fruit with a seed inside. So the flesh of the black pepper is very, very thin, very, very wrinkled when it's ripe. The seed inside is a whitish color. Piperine it's not capsaicin, it's piperine, has the same kind of heat that is imparted by its very distant relative, the red peppers, the chili peppers that we just met. This black pepper, piper, just like the anise, the star anise, black pepper belongs to that group of very, 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 very early of the first flowering plants. So this is an ancient lineage with these tiny little flowers, basically just a little couple anthers and a giant ovary, not big on the petals department. Once the egg inside the fruit is fertilized, it grows into the single seed. Taking the fruit when it's ripe with its black seed coat, grinding it up, that's black pepper. Taking the seed, the flesh of the fruit off and just revealing the white seed, that's white pepper. Little bit milder in the absence of that extra black flesh coating. And green peppers are the unripened fruit, also dried and ground into the green pepper. The little pink peppercorns, those actually come from the Brazilian pepper, the invasive species that's taking over a lot of Florida. Also unrelated to chili peppers or black pepper, but Brazilian pepper has those defensive compounds in its fruit that people like, that very, very spicy, hot, flavorful compound. We do know that pepper has been used as a currency. This was another one of those plants that depends on a tropical climate to grow, not something that could have been brought into cultivation in Europe in the temperate zone. It requires the tropics. So this one had to be moved over great distances at great expense. And the piperine that we mentioned before, that active ingredient in flavor, is still being studied haven't quite found any applications for black pepper yet. There are, however, published studies on anti-inflammatories where turmeric, which we didn't meet today, turmeric being a root like ginger, not a very distant relative of ginger, turmeric's anti-inflammatory capabilities have been shown to be increased when combined with black pepper. I can't recite the physiological pathway that this happens or how this was derived, but this has been published several times. The efficacy of turmeric as an anti-inflammatory has been shown to be increased in the presence of ground up black pepper. I've kept you a few minutes late. I'm so glad you joined us today. I'm going to have to wrap it there. To sum up, our spices are basically plant defensive chemicals. We're not supposed to like them, but we do. They have anti-everything properties. Some of the synthates, the compounds that are made by the plants, have antifungal activity to protect the developing seed from the onslaught of potentially harmful fungus, antibacterial to keep the growing embryo alive to adulthood so that it can produce seeds and a new generation. Just the presence of certain toxic chemicals or noxious chemicals are a defense against predation. Again, plants, they don't want to be eaten. They want to reproduce. And they're produced throughout. We have found all these defensive chemicals throughout different plants that are native to different parts of the world, and humans have sought out those defensive chemicals, and we have taken them and brought them into our pharmacopoeia, and we have brought them into our culinary traditions throughout the world. Would have loved to have talked about every single spice in the world, but my boss has told me that I really, really, really need to stick to time. So let's just spend the next few minutes. We're going to get to questions. I see that we've got quite a few in the Q&A. That's awesome. That's a great place to put any questions that you might have. But first, Julia's going to launch a quick poll while I get a quick drink of water. If you wouldn't mind just answering these few questions just as quickly as you can. There's no penalty. We always are looking to improve upon our classes. And we've got, am I muted? I'm not muted. And we've got some good questions in the Q&A. Lori would like to know, can the antimicrobial properties of some spices impact the intestinal flora? That is a fantastic question. One that I do not personally have the answer to, but wouldn't that be interesting to research? The antimicrobial properties, what is the effect that might have on our own intestinal floras? That opens up a whole world of good stuff to chew on and think about the intestinal flora of the people who grow up and are used to consuming a certain profile of spices versus someone from another part of the country, and how their intestinal flora is more adjusted to the toxins that are a part of that cuisine. What is a good resource for growing spices here on the Gulf Coast? Well, see, that's the fun thing about spices. Herbs you can grow. There's books about it. Spices, they're trickier. Spices tend to come from more tricky plants. It's why spices are so much more expensive. They are much pickier. They require much more, a narrower growing conditions. They might not be available in large quantities at any particular time. You might be lucky to get 5 peppercorns off your pepper plant in a year. And so you see how that would kind of add up and add up. So one of the reasons that we're drawing attention to this interesting group of plants is that it's not easy. And as far as successfully growing, I don't know if that means getting 1 peppercorn off your pepper bush or making a business out of it. If it were easy, we would be a source of spices for the world. If the Gulf Coast were a good place to grow spices, we would be. Somebody would making some money off that. I'm not being flip in the answer. It's just kind of underscoring why this is such an interesting group of plants that are included in the spices. Any books on the fascinating history of spices? There are a few. I'm terrible with remembering anything except plant names. There is a book that came out in the past 5 years. Oh, it might even be just about nutmeg. Anita, I'm sorry, I can't give you that answer today, but they're out there. And because the stories are so cloak and dagger and bloody, they got everything. How did we figure out about the chemical in star anise was good for Tamiflu? Y'all are asking me questions I can't answer today, which is good because I'm never going to forget these questions, and I'm going to definitely find the answer before I go to sleep tonight. Here's another good one. How did we figure out the chemical in from star anise was effective to put into Tamiflu? I don't know. I should leave it there. I'd like to think that it had a traditional use that was elevated to the modern pharmacopoeia. Is the Jamaican caper the native plant that produces capers? Yes, that one I can answer. Bonnie, thank you for asking a question that I can answer. Our native Caparis is the genus, is called Jamaican caper, and its distribution is here and throughout the Caribbean. All right, that's the Q&A section. I also see that we have some things going on in, do we have anything going on in chat?
No, we're good there.
We're good in chat. Thank you very much, Julia. All right, I've kept you 12 minutes extra. I want to thank you all for joining us today. Again, come next week, we'll be doing botanical science for beginners at 2 o'clock next Wednesday. That'll be right here. You can sign up as you did before. You can see recordings, as always, of our previous webinars on our YouTube channel, UF IFAS Extension Pinellas County on YouTube. March 24, 2 o'clock, Botanical Science for Beginners. And as always, any questions, comments, complaints, or concerns, feel free to send me an email at this address, jstevenson@pinellascounty.org. Go and enjoy this beautiful day, and thank you again for joining us this afternoon.